Good afternoon, and welcome to another Facebook Live Lunch and Learn with the Center for African American Health. We continue to host COVID clinics. We're going to be doing that throughout the end of the year. We are providing both first and second and third doses of both Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, as well as the booster vaccinations for individuals who've completed their at least 2 shots and have had at least a 6-month lag in between. We're also providing flu vaccinations as well. We're waiting a few minutes just for folks to tune in, and then we'll get started. So while we're waiting, if you're unfamiliar with who we are, my name is Deidre Johnson, and I'm with the Center for African American 40 years with a focus and commitment to improving the health and well-being of our community. We serve the African American community with community-based, evidence-based disease prevention and disease management programs. We also work to help people really get connected to the resources they need. You can learn more about our work and our programs by visiting the website at caahealth.org. So November is recognized as National Family Caregivers Month, a time to honor and uplift individuals who strengthen the family unit by selflessly caring for their loved ones. A recent report from AARP and the National Alliance for Caregiving revealed that the number of Americans providing unpaid care has increased over the last 5 years. Family caregivers are in worse health compared to 5 years ago, and 61% of caregivers are women. 61% also have full-time employment in addition to providing support for loved ones. And I also know that when it comes to Alzheimer's and some other diseases such as Parkinson's, our caregiving numbers as African Americans are even larger than other communities because of that value we have of taking care of family. So you may recognize our special guest today from previous collaborations with the Center for African American Health, including our Facebook Live Lunch and Learn events, this year's Collaborative Black Health Summit. She'll also be joining us next year for our 20th anniversary health fair. Nadine Roberts Cornish is the founder of the Caregivers Guardian, an organization dedicated to empowering and inspiring caregivers to create a process that will allow them to tend to their loved ones while managing their own needs. Welcome back, Nadine.
Thank you so much for having me, Deidre. I'm glad to be here.
Please share a little bit of your background and give us an overview of the mission of your organization for our viewers who might be unfamiliar with the wonderful work you're doing really in our community and nationally.
Okay, so my background is in public health, and 25 years ago, almost 30 years ago now, I was minding my own business, like most of us do, trying to live my best life, and the phone rang. And it was my mother's doctor saying that she had a pituitary brain tumor. And so in a matter of a phone call, life as I knew it changed dramatically. I didn't know at that point that I was beginning what would be a nearly 15-year journey of caring for my mother. I know that I was especially blessed and privileged because I had a background in public health. I knew how to advocate for my mother. I knew that no was the default setting so that I would hear no a lot and not be fazed by it because it just simply meant I needed to say next and find another avenue to do what it was that needed to be done. But I was very cognizant during that time frame that I was fortunate in the education, the experience, and the knowledge of navigating the system. And so my mother went through so many different maladies, so many different illnesses, and I began to scratch my head and wonder. And it would often be said that she was a test subject. And sure enough, my mother was a test subject for me as I began to prepare for the work that I would ultimately do through the Caregivers Guardian. After my mother transitioned, I launched the business called the Caregivers Guardian. And for the past 12 years, we've been supporting family caregivers across the country. And I will tell you, Deidre, I've gone from just simply wanting to educate and raise awareness to I want to save lives. I want to save the lives of caregivers who are so stressed, so incredibly inundated, so void of resources and support. TCG is all about being that lifeline. And so that's what we do every single day, support caregivers across the country, of course, here in the Denver area, through consultation, through Lunch and Learn series, education and training, and just the necessary support that they need so that they're able to make themselves a priority so that they can, in fact, support the loved ones in their life who need to be supported.
Thank you. What are some of the most notable changes you've seen during the past few years? And talk about some of the ways, especially this pandemic, has affected the lives of caregivers.
Okay, let me start with the good news. The good news is that the virtual world has opened up an entire world to caregivers who did not have access. So the great conferences, health fairs that would happen, if you're providing 24/7 care to a loved one, you may have the intention of attending that great health fair in February. It happens every year. You get such great resources. The center does this every year, and you can count on it. But if you're caring for a loved one, you may have all the plans laid, and you may be ready. And that morning something happens, and you're not able to attend. But because everything is basically available virtually now, caregivers who didn't have access to amazing resources, health fairs, conferences, trainings, workshops, they now have access to that through the virtual world. So that's been a plus, and that's been a major change for all of us, right? But for caregivers, the isolation and the inability to be supported by the normal support systems that they had before the pandemic, that has been derailed in many instances. And the isolation and the loneliness that too many caregivers experience, in addition to the fact that if they had in-home health support services before the pandemic, those services have been greatly diminished, partly because of the concerns around COVID before the vaccine. And then since the vaccine has been available, just as many areas have been impacted, areas of employment have been impacted, there is a shortage. And so it's difficult to get that in-home support. And so isolation, loneliness, additional stress, fewer resources have absolutely impacted the caregiver. And so we talk about it because we want people who are not actively caregiving to pay attention to the caregivers in their world, whether it's family members, whether it's coworkers, neighbors, community church members. We want you to pay attention to the caregivers in your world because they need you.
They do, and it's often a secret thing that you may not know about a coworker.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you were already devoted to supporting caregivers through your organization, the Caregivers Guardian, but the pandemic inspired you to take things a step further. I'm tongue-tied today. With the launch of the 10-10-30 campaign. Please explain the significance of the name and the movement.
Absolutely. So last year, I think it was September, the 1st of September, realizing that November is National Family Caregivers Month, and also recognizing that for me and with our business, the Caregivers Guardian, we were so inundated with calls and caregivers needing support. And that support oftentimes meant that they just needed to talk to someone. They didn't need anything done. They just needed someone to talk to. And so when we were thinking about what are we going to do for National Family Caregivers Month last year, in the midst of this pandemic and still dealing with the lockdown, we really were intentional about creating a campaign that would raise awareness. And so 10-10-30 came as a result of prayer and a real desire to create something that would make a difference. 10 random acts of kindness, 10,000 books to caregivers in 30 days. The books were important because we wanted to be able to provide a tangible, valuable resource to caregivers. And so 10,000 books to caregivers in 30 days. That was just a challenge. that we thought we could meet, and we came close. We got up close to 7,000 books. And so this year we're at it again, 10 random acts of kindness. Random acts of kindness can be done by anyone. You don't have to spend a nickel to do a random act of kindness for a caregiver in your world. And so we're hoping that eventually we get up to 10 million random acts of kindness. But the goal is to also get 10,000 books into the hands of caregivers who are in need of support, inspiration, and encouragement.
So let's talk a little bit more about the random acts of kindness, and maybe even come up with some suggestions, because I do know oftentimes things we might take for granted and think are too small are really meaningful for other folks.
Absolutely. Yes. So, okay, let's start with something that we do all the time. We're constantly texting people. I ask that you not text the caregiver in your world, but you actually pick up the phone, call and talk to them. Leave a message so that they can hear your voice, and say to them, hey, I was just thinking about you and I wanted to reach out and touch. Sometimes a conversation and just the fact that they've been thought of is enough to make their entire day. Another very simple thing to do, everybody loves flowers and plants, and of course getting a bouquet of flowers is always a wonderful experience for sure. But succulent plants are really, really easy, and they are great reminders of resilience and steadfastness, and they're easy to care for, right? And so being able to provide a caregiver with something as simple as a plant that's low maintenance, nothing that they've got to do too much work around, is also another very simple random act of kindness. One of the things that I always encourage families to do is to involve the children in their world, in the caregiving and acknowledgement of caregivers, right? And so if you've got little kids who love to draw, have them draw something for the caregiver to cheer them up. Teenagers are great at being able to support caregivers by showing up and cleaning the car, or vacuuming the car, or vacuuming inside of the house, or sitting down and having a conversation with the caregiver or the care recipient, asking questions, learning about relatives or family friends who are very much a part of the family, and having those engaging conversations. It's stimulating and it's a benefit to everybody involved. And I'll say this last thing about random acts of kindness. Whatever it is that you decide to do, you are going to feel so much better doing that than the person who actually is the recipient of the act of kindness. And so it has a snowball effect. And so we're excited about random acts of kindness happening all over the city, the state, the country, as it pertains to caregivers throughout the month of November. And hopefully, it'll continue beyond that time as well.
It's been a while for me, because I was in that caregiver position before my father transitioned.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time he had really severe dementia. And it really was, you're working hard, but there's also a heartbreak. And I remember the two sister friends that would call and say, hey, how are you doing? And
Yes.
it made all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I say that there are only four types of people in the world: those who have been a caregiver, those who are a caregiver, those who will be a caregiver, and those who are going to need a caregiver. And so it's going to hit home sooner or later. And I appreciate the fact that you've had the experience, because having the experience absolutely makes you very aware of what people who are going through, and they don't even know yet, right? They don't even know. Sometimes they're just beginning, and they're not quite sure of what the journey is that lies ahead. But I will say this: caregiving is a transformative process. It is designed to change who you are. You are not going to start the caregiving journey and be the same person throughout that journey. And when that journey is over, you will be changed. And embracing that is I think it's a huge asset in moving forward and progressing and thriving through the journey, knowing that, okay, this experience is here to change me. And I always say, hopefully it's changing you for your higher and best self.
So what does one have to do to join the campaign?
click on the 101030campaign.com page and just sign up to join the campaign. We're still looking for sponsors and supporters. It costs nothing to do a random act of kindness, but to be able to get out 10,000 books to caregivers across the country, there's a substantial cost associated with that. And so we are seeking sponsors and individual donors to simply support the campaign so that we're able to meet that goal of getting 10,000 books out to caregivers across the country.
So Nadine, in addition to being the founder of this wonderful organization, you're also a published author of 2 books, Tears in My Gumbo and Prayers in My Gumbo.
Yes.
Talk about this beautiful and heartfelt collection of literature.
Thank you. So Tears in My Gumbo was absolutely an incredible labor of love that was almost 8 years in the making. I knew when I was caring for my mom that I would share some of that story, but it wasn't until I began the work as the Caregivers Guardian that caregivers that I was fortunate to work with, I would write their caregiving story to them, and I would give that to them as a gift when their loved one transitioned. Because sometimes we do things, Deidre, and we have no idea of what we've done. We just know, we don't know how we did it, but we did it. And so being fortunate as a caregiver consultant and coach at that time, actually I was a care manager at that in the very beginning. And so I would literally keep notes. And when a caregiver's journey had come to an end, I would write them a letter, and it would be the story of their journey from my perspective. And every single time they said, please share this story. I said, no, I wrote the story for you so that you would see it and you would be able to expound on it and begin to write your own story, right? And so time and time again, I was asked to share my story and to share stories of other caregivers. And so Tears in My Gumbo was literally born the Christmas after my mom transitioned. I had to make gumbo. I'm from New Orleans, y'all. Gumbo is in my DNA. And so it just made so much sense. Gumbo is one of the most complex dishes that you can make, but it's one of the most fulfilling dishes, culinary experiences that you can have when you have really good, authentic gumbo. Okay. And so the correlation between caregiving and gumbo just made so much sense to me. And so I felt like, okay, so gumbo is complex, caregiving is complex. You can make it by yourself, but it's so much better if you do it in community, just like caregiving, right? And so the Caregivers Gumbo series was born. Tears in My Gumbo is a little bit of my own story, my experience caring for my grandmother long distance as well. And it's about 10 families that I had the honor of working with, sharing their stories. And each story is different so that you get a full picture of what the caregiving journey can be like, whether you're caring for someone with dementia, whether you've got major family dynamics going on. There's a story that addresses that. What happens when faith leads you through your caregiving journey and you realize that the work that you're doing is literally, it's God's work, and what happens along those lines. So a myriad of stories to teach lessons, to provide resources, and most importantly, inspiration. And then Prayers in My Gumbo was born last year during the pandemic. We literally had 40 caregivers from across the country who shared their stories of inspiration. Some shared prayers, some shared musings, poems. And so this is like a collection of inspiration of caregivers from across the country. So Prayers in My Gumbo is the caregiver's recipe for peace. Tears in My Gumbo is the caregiver's recipe for resilience. And finally, we are now in the process of building our next book in the Caregivers Gumbo series called Recipes in My Gumbo. And that is a collection of recipes that feed the soul, feed the spirit. And those recipes are being collected from caregivers across the country. So Deidre, you are absolutely invited to submit a recipe, something that may remind you of your dad or any loved one, or anything that's a family tradition, that's a delicious meal, because this is going to be a serious cookbook of great recipes. We are fortunate to have personal chef Lisa Givens of Gourmet Away supporting us in this effort. So she's going to be testing all of the recipes that are submitted, and would love to invite the audience, those of you who have a great recipe that you'd like to share, as well as a story, to click on the link for recipes in my gumbo to obtain the intent form and participate in the process.
That's fantastic. So we know that often people feel alone in their caregiving journey, which is why support groups are so very helpful. Was that the motivation behind the virtual series, Compassion in My Cup?
Absolutely. We actually have been providing a support group for the last 18 months now, every Monday. It's calling all caregivers, 12 noon. Caregivers from around the country log on to participate in an hour-long support group. A call. But as we were building our content for National Family Caregivers Month, we know that one of the missing elements, that there's a void of compassion in our country right now. And we conceptualized Compassion in My Cup, which is a series of conversations around caregiving, around tough issues, around just the need to support each other in our humanity. And so Compassion in My Cup conversations are happening every Tuesday, 1 p.m. It is a hybrid event. Chili's Tea House here in Denver is the sponsor of Compassion in My Cup. So we're at Chili's, we're having high tea and conversation. And that portion is invitation only, but we absolutely encourage everybody to hop on Facebook Live or register on the Zoom link to be a guest and to participate in Compassion in My Cup conversations.
Wonderful. I went the -101030 campaign. Another thing to share is that we're going to be collaborating on Tuesday, November 23rd, which is our next COVID vaccination clinic at the Center for African American Health from 5 to 8. Not only will, as I mentioned earlier, we be offering Pfizer and Moderna and flu shots, but we're collaborating with Nadine and team to create really a caregiver COVID-19 clinic focus. And we'll be giving copies away. I think we'll have 100 copies of your books.
Exactly, yes. Yes. We are so excited about that, and really encouraging all caregivers who have not been vaccinated, all caregivers who are in need of their boosters at this point, to sign up for the 23rd, because we definitely want to make that a special event for caregivers and to ensure that they get the necessary vaccines and boosts that they need to have.
So one of the questions that came in, if an adult's parents haven't gotten to an age or point where caregiving is needed yet, what advice would you give before that life change occurs for themselves and their loved ones?
That is a great question. Thank you for that question. And oh my, it's the preferred question, because that's planning. That's about contemplating what may come down the line. And so the conversation is absolutely essential. It is necessary to have the conversation with your parents. What happens when life happens? And the families who do that are so much better equipped and so much better prepared when life eventually happens. In COVID-19, none of us could have dreamed that we would have been in a pandemic in 2020, 2021. And so, unfortunately, we have had too many people get COVID premature and suffer premature debilitating illnesses and COVID long haul. And unfortunately, too many people have died. And so it is important to have the conversation. It's important to say, let's talk about what we will do as a family, how we will support each other as a family. And in doing so, you're able to come up with some really great ideas that are supportive of the entire family, as opposed to, you know, getting a call and having your life turn on a dime with no thought, right? And so,
So along those lines, let's say you have a family dynamic in which that's a hard conversation to have. Do you have any suggestions on how to get those conversations started with parents?
Yeah, so a lot of times mediation needs to happen, meaning that there needs to be another party, a more neutral party, or an individual who is considered a trusted source within the family dynamic. So that could be a friend, that could be a minister, that could be another relative to help facilitate the discussion. But it absolutely needs to happen. And there has to be one person committed to the need for it to happen, to be creative and to be intentional around getting the conversation scheduled. It's also one of the things we do at TCG. We help facilitate those difficult conversations with family members just to ensure that it happens and to ensure that affairs are in order and everybody is as much on the same page as possible. If not, we make sure they're at least reading the same book.
So Nadine, please feel free to share any additional resources that we might not have discussed yet that you have for our audience.
Absolutely. So I definitely want to reiterate the fact that we do offer a free support group to caregivers. And now, because of the virtual world, we have caregivers from across the country that participate every Monday, 12 noon. You can just go to the website, click on the link, and register for the Calling All Caregivers call. In addition, we provide a 15-minute consultation to any caregiver with any challenge, any situation that they're contending with. We want to make sure that we can't solve all of the problems, but we want to make sure that every caregiver is supported. And as I said earlier, we're changing our mission. You know, we don't just want to see caregivers thrive. We want to see caregivers live and survive this journey, because unfortunately, too many caregivers die before the person they're caring for. And we want to interrupt that cycle.
Nadine, thank you so much for what you do. You are this beautiful example of someone who went through something and then turned it into a gift to the world to help others navigate it even better. And I've known you for a long time. I wish I'd known you back then.
Yeah.
But I can't mention enough, because caregiving is something that so many of us take for granted, know nothing about. And like you said, either we're about to do it or about to need it. So now is the time to really try to do it as well and with as much grace and compassion as possible.
That piece is so important, the compassion piece and the grace. And the more prepared we are, the more grace and the more compassion we have. I like that. I'll be using that. Thank you, Deidre.
Well, thank you for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing you again on the 23rd for our event. Just want to reiterate that please feel free to check out the center's website for upcoming events, as well as the upcoming vaccination events. Again, join us on Tuesday, the 23rd. If you're a caregiver, well, anyone join us who needs a vaccination, but please join us if you're a caregiver and are interested in kind of meeting others and getting additional support and picking up a free book. Remember to take care of yourself and don't be reluctant to seek help when needed. Take care.
Thank you, Deidre.
Thanks.